Welcome to Hidden Reality, where we uncover the truths buried beneath the surface. Today, we're embarking on a deep investigation into, well, the modern illusion of wealth. When we look at the billionaires of our era, it's so easy to just assume that humanity has reached the absolute peak of individual fortune. We see these numbers on screens, wild stock valuations, staggering net worths that just seem completely unprecedented. But are these modern titans actually the wealthiest humans to ever exist? Or is there a deeper, hidden financial history that tells a completely different story? Let's dive right into this mystery. To really grasp the scale of our investigation, we first got to look at the absolute poster child of modern wealth, Elon Musk. His earning speed is literally incomprehensible to the human brain. Think about this. In the short time it's taken me to just introduce this whole concept to you, he's made another 88 million rupees. Yeah, you heard that right. To put that into a chilling perspective, if an average person with an average salary wanted to catch up to his total net worth, they would need to work for, wait for it, 8 million years. That's literally 30 times longer than modern humans have even existed on this planet. Crazy, right?
So, making that much money, the natural assumption is that he just has to be the wealthiest man of all time, right? Well, here is exactly where we shatter that illusion. As our investigation here at Hidden Reality looks backward through time, we find historical figures who commanded resources so vast, so unimaginable, that our modern billionaires might actually look kind of broke by comparison. It really makes you wonder, is Elon Musk actually the wealthiest? Or is our entire definition of wealth just fundamentally flawed?
This actually forces us to redefine what rich even means. Let's look at two incredibly different economic profiles from the 20th century. On one side, we have the infamous Pablo Escobar, a man who possessed literal physical mountains of untraceable cash. And on the flip side, we have Joseph Stalin, a leader who technically had an absolute lack of personal liquid money. So which of these guys represents true, boundless wealth? Let's take a look at pure physical cash flow first. During his absolute peak in the 1980s, Pablo Escobar was generating roughly $420 million a single week. The sheer volume of paper bills was a total logistical nightmare. Get this, he was funding $800 a week strictly on rubber bands, just to bundle his money together. And even more astonishing, he was writing off $2 billion annually simply because the cash would rot in storage or literally get eaten by rats. So if we're measuring wealth purely by the possession of physical banknotes, Escobar's hoard was historically unmatched.
But that leads us to a completely different kind of wealth, embodied by our next suspect, Joseph Stalin. Unlike Escobar, Stalin had virtually zero personal savings. According to historical accounts, he never spent a single dime of his own official salary. Actually, he reportedly never even looked at it. But here's the catch. He maintained total, unquestioned control over the entire Soviet Union. If we look at the economy he commanded with that absolute authority, today it would be valued at a staggering $10 trillion. He didn't need a wallet because, well, he owned the entire board.
And we see a very similar yet distinct model of wealth accumulation when we look at the financial mechanics behind Adolf Hitler's rise. Starting out as a homeless artist in Vienna, he leveraged his early political momentum to build vast personal wealth through systematic exploitation. He literally mandated the purchase of 6 million copies of his book, copyrighted his own image and speeches to extract continuous royalties from the state, and secured $5 billion in private supporter donations. Ultimately, this massive cash grab allowed him to control a heavily militarized European empire, the economic equivalent of roughly $3 trillion today. But political control and brute force aren't the only ways to build a world-altering fortune. We absolutely have to pivot to industrialist Henry Ford. Now, Ford engineered a $200 billion empire using an entirely different kind of psychology. By recognizing the serious risk of labor exhaustion and revolt, he made a super calculated move. He doubled his workers' pay to $5 a day and actually reduced their work week. Listen, it wasn't about charity at all. It was purely about stabilization and maximizing output. And this stabilization, it totally paved the way for his true masterstroke. Ford's implementation of the assembly line slashed the time it took to build a Model T from 12 hours down to just 90 minutes. This unprecedented efficiency dropped the price of the car down to a super accessible $260. The guy didn't just build personal wealth, he fundamentally restructured modern society. He practically invented the suburbs, the modern commute, and the standard work schedule we all know today.
Now, Ford's massive manufacturing boom was actually built on a foundation laid just a few decades earlier. Following the wealth trail backward, we hit the Gilded Age of the late 1800s. And wow, this was an era of maximum capitalism, completely unchecked by modern regulations. We see Cornelius Vanderbilt absolutely dominating the railroads, eventually passing the baton of absolute wealth over to Andrew Carnegie and Steel, which leads us straight to the door of history's first officially recognized billionaire.
That man was John D. Rockefeller. By 1880, his company, Standard Oil, ruthlessly commanded 90% of all U.S. oil refineries. He was an absolute monopolist. But here is where Hidden Reality's deep dive reveals a truly brilliant paradox. When the U.S. government finally stepped in to break up his monopoly into 34 separate companies back in 1911, the whole decision totally backfired. By holding shares in all of those newly formed, highly profitable entities, his vast fortune ironically multiplied almost overnight. Talk about a plot twist. Yet, if we're really tracking the hidden flow of money, we find an older, way more elusive network operating right behind the scenes. Enter the Rothschild family. Rising from a pretty small coin dealership in the 1700s, they strategically deployed their sons across Europe's major financial centers in the early 1800s. And to protect their immense banking wealth from external seizure or dilution, well, they utilized stocks, government bonds, and a highly controversial strategy known as the cousin method, basically intermarrying exclusively within their own family line to keep the fortune entirely centralized. Now, the internet is absolutely flooded with wild claims about this family. So the crucial point for us here is that we must look past the paper trail to separate fact from fiction. Look, many people claim the Rothschilds secretly hold a $500 trillion net worth today. But the reality, over the centuries, their incredible wealth decentralized across dozens of heirs and philanthropic ventures. While their modern collective net worth is highly debated, at its absolute peak in the 19th century, Nathan Rothschild held an impressive but totally mortal $20 billion. To find numbers that truly warp reality, we have to look back to our ancient suspects. Way back in 1324, King Mansa Musa of Mali controlled roughly 50% of the globe's gold, a fortune estimated at $400 billion. He was so incredibly rich, he literally crashed local economies by giving away way too much gold on a road trip. And then, of course, there's Genghis Khan, whose terrifying empire covered 20% of the Earth's landmass, theoretically valued at an insane $130 trillion today. But it's really vital to note here that Khan's wealth was immediately redistributed to buy his soldiers' loyalty. He never actually retained it for himself. So we are now at the climax of our investigation. We've examined the mountains of paper cash, the untouchable power of absolute control, the iron grip of monopolists, and the ancient hordes of kings. Hidden Reality must now decipher these final clues and render the ultimate verdict. How do we even mathematically compare a modern tech billionaire to a Gilded Age oil baron? Let's actually compare our final two suspects mathematically. At his financial peak in 1913, John D. Rockefeller's personal wealth equaled a staggering 2% of the entire United States gross domestic product. When we compare that directly against Elon Musk today, Musk's wealth equates to roughly 1.4% of the modern U.S. GDP. So on paper, it seemingly defeats Musk, making Rockefeller the undisputed king. Case closed, right? But wait. Here is the climactic twist that finally solves this case. You can't simply look at the percentages. You have to look at the massive scale of the world. The modern U.S. economy has expanded and grown an incredible 22 times over since 1913. So while Rockefeller commanded a massive slice, yes, it was a slice of a comparatively very, very small cake. When you combine absolute personal ownership, meaning the wealth is entirely legally yours, not tied up in state control like Stalin or military conquests like Genghis Khan, with the unparalleled technological leverage of a massively scaled, globalized modern economy, the victor becomes crystal clear. Elon Musk is the biggest fish in the absolutely largest financial lake humanity has ever created. The sheer, unprecedented scale of today's hyperconnected world crowns him as the true victor of this historical wealth race. We've tracked the money from the ancient sands of Mali to the steel mills of America, right up to the modern digital frontier. It leaves us with a massive question. If true wealth today is defined by total global leverage rather than physical gold, who's going to be history's first trillionaire, and what kind of world will they control? This mystery has been decoded by Hidden Reality. Subscribe to Hidden Reality for more deep dives into the unknown.